A wealthy CEO's daughter discovers two toddler twins floating on a makeshift raft in the river behind her mansion. What seems like a simple rescue quickly unravels into a shocking family mystery involving a long-lost sister, a dangerous past, and secrets that have been buried for years. When little Amelia calls her father with four simple words, "Daddy, I found the twins," she has no idea she's about to reunite a broken family and expose a truth that will change their lives forever. But who are these babies? Why were they sent down the river? And what devastating secret connects them to the Ashford family? Before we start this beautiful story, comment "Hope" below and tell us where you're watching from. The afternoon sun cast golden ripples across the private river that wound behind the Ashford estate in Riverside, Connecticut. 6-year-old Amelia Ashford sat cross-legged on the manicured lawn, her blonde pigtails bouncing as she arranged her tea party with meticulous care. Her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Whiskers, occupied the seat of honor, while her favorite dolls formed a semicircle around the tiny plastic cups. "More tea, Mrs. Buttons?" Amelia asked in her most grown-up voice, tilting an empty teapot toward a porcelain-faced doll. The May breeze carried the scent of blooming magnolias from her mother's garden, and somewhere in the distance a cardinal sang its bright song. Amelia was pouring imaginary tea into the fourth cup when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to her perfect afternoon. A soft crying, barely audible over the gentle rushing of the river. She froze, her small hand still clutching the plastic teapot, her blue eyes wide with confusion. The crying came again, louder this time, urgent, desperate. Dropping the teapot, Amelia scrambled to her feet and ran toward the riverbank, her white sandals slapping against the grass. Her heart hammered in her chest as she reached the stone wall that separated the lawn from the water's edge. What she saw made her gasp aloud. A makeshift raft, nothing more than wooden planks bound together with fraying rope, was caught against the rocks near the shore. And on that raft, wrapped in what looked like old blankets, were two crying babies. Twins by the look of them, with matching blonde hair plastered to their tiny heads. They looked to be around 2 years old, their faces red and wet with tears, their small fists waving helplessly at the sky. "Oh no!" Amelia breathed, her mind racing. She knew she shouldn't go near the river alone. Mommy and Daddy had made that rule very clear, but the babies were crying and they looked so scared and cold. Without thinking twice, she carefully climbed over the low stone wall, her feet finding purchase on the rocky bank. "It's okay, babies," she called out in her gentlest voice, the same tone she used when her cat was frightened. "Don't cry. I'm coming." The water was shallow near the edge, barely reaching above her ankles as she waded out. The current was gentle here, and Amelia thanked her lucky stars, a phrase she'd learned from her grandmother. Her small hands gripped the edge of the raft, and with all the strength her 6-year-old body could muster, she pulled it toward the shore. The babies' crying intensified as the raft moved, their tiny faces scrunching up in fear and discomfort. Amelia's heart broke a little with each sob. Once the raft was secure against the rocks, she carefully lifted the first baby, a little boy with the most enormous blue eyes she'd ever seen. He was heavier than she expected, and she nearly stumbled before regaining her balance. "Shh, shh," she murmured, cradling him against her chest the way she'd seen her mother hold her baby cousin last Christmas. "You're safe now. I've got you." The little boy's crying softened to whimpers, his tiny hand clutching at Amelia's pink t-shirt. Encouraged, she carefully set him down on a dry patch of grass and returned for his twin brother, who was screaming even louder now, his face turning an alarming shade of purple. "I didn't forget you," Amelia assured him, lifting him with both arms. This one was even heavier, or maybe she was just getting tired. She managed to get him to shore and set him down next to his brother, both babies now looking up at her with wide, tearful eyes that seemed far too wise for their age. It was then that Amelia noticed something odd. As she knelt beside them, adjusting their damp blankets, she saw it, a small, distinctive birthmark on the neck of one of the twins. It was shaped like a tiny crescent moon, no bigger than her pinky fingernail. Her breath caught in her throat. She'd seen that mark before. Where had she seen it? Her father. Daddy had the same mark in the exact same spot. Amelia's hands trembled as she pulled out her small pink cell phone, a gift from her parents for emergencies only. This definitely qualified as an emergency. She pressed the speed dial for her father, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Daddy?" Her voice cracked as he answered on the second ring. "Daddy, I found the twins." There was a pause on the other end, filled only with the sound of her father's breathing and the distant murmur of his office. "What did you say, sweetheart?" "I found the twins, Daddy," Amelia repeated, her voice stronger now despite the tears building in her eyes. "In the river. They were floating on a raft and they were crying, and Daddy, they're so little and scared, and one of them has your moon mark, the one on your neck. He has the same one." Another pause, longer this time. When Benjamin Ashford spoke again, his voice had changed entirely, sharp, urgent, barely controlled. "Where are you, Amelia?" "Exactly where are you?" "By the river, behind the garden, the place where we feed the ducks." "Don't move. Do you understand me? Don't move an inch. I'm coming right now. Keep the babies warm." The line went dead. Amelia stared at her phone for a moment, then looked down at the two little boys who had stopped crying and were now watching her with those impossibly blue eyes. She didn't understand what was happening, but she knew one thing for certain. Finding these babies was going to change everything. She took off her cardigan, despite the chill that raised goosebumps on her arms, and carefully draped it over the twins. They needed it more than she did. As she sat down beside them on the grass, one of the babies reached out and grabbed her finger with his tiny hand. His grip was surprisingly strong, and something in Amelia's heart shifted and expanded in a way she'd never experienced before. "It's going to be okay," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was reassuring the babies or herself. "My daddy will fix everything. He always does." In the distance, she could hear shouting, her father's voice, urgent and commanding, followed by her mother's higher-pitched responses. Footsteps pounded across the lawn, growing louder with each passing second. Amelia looked up to see both her parents running toward her, her father's face pale with an emotion she couldn't name, her mother's hand pressed against her mouth in shock. Benjamin Ashford dropped to his knees beside the babies, his hands shaking as he reached out to touch them. His eyes were wet with tears as he carefully examined the birthmark on the first twin's neck. Victoria Ashford stood frozen, one hand clutching her husband's shoulder, the other covering her trembling lips. "Ben?" she whispered. "Is it possible? Could they really be—" "Sarah's boys," Benjamin finished, his voice breaking on his sister's name. "These are Sarah's boys. I know it. I can feel it." Amelia looked between her parents, confusion and concern warring in her young mind. "Who's Sarah, Daddy?" Her father looked at her then, and in his eyes she saw a pain so deep it made her want to cry. He pulled her close, wrapping one arm around her while his other hand remained on the babies. "Sarah is my little sister, sweetheart, your aunt. She's been gone for a very long time." "Gone where?" "That," her mother said softly, kneeling down to join them, "is what we need to find out. And we need to find out fast, because someone put these babies on that river for a reason. Someone was sending them to us." The cardinal in the distance sang again, but this time its song sounded different to Amelia, not cheerful, but urgent. A warning or a message, she couldn't tell which. As her father carefully lifted both babies into his arms and her mother called 911 on her phone, Amelia picked up one of the damp blankets the twins had been wrapped in. That's when she saw it, embroidered in faded blue thread in the corner of the blanket, with "Love, Martha." Who was Martha, and where was Aunt Sarah? The questions swirled in Amelia's mind as her perfect afternoon tea party lay forgotten on the lawn, the plastic cups overturned by the wind. Mr. Whiskers, watching with his button eyes as the Ashford family's carefully ordered world began to crack wide open. The Riverside General Hospital emergency room buzzed with controlled chaos. Benjamin Ashford paced back and forth in the private waiting area, his expensive Italian shoes squeaking against the polished linoleum floor. His normally immaculate appearance was disheveled, tie loosened, shirt untucked, hair standing in wild directions from running his hands through it too many times. Victoria sat in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs, little Amelia curled up in her lap, watching everything with those observant blue eyes that missed nothing. The little girl hadn't said much since they'd arrived at the hospital, but Victoria could feel the tension in her daughter's small body, the way she startled every time a door opened or a phone rang. "Mr. Ashford?" A doctor emerged from the examination room, pulling off latex gloves. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. "I'm Dr. Patricia Chen. I've completed the initial examination of the twins." Benjamin stopped pacing immediately, his whole body tensing. "And? They're remarkably healthy considering their ordeal. Slight dehydration, some exposure to cold water, but nothing critical. We're keeping them overnight for observation, but I expect they'll make a full recovery." Dr. Chen paused, consulting the tablet in her hands. "I did notice something interesting, though. Both boys have been recently checked by a physician, probably within the last week. Their vaccinations are up to date, and there are signs of generally good care. Whoever had them before this incident was taking proper care of them." Victoria stood up, settling Amelia on her hip. "So this wasn't neglect?" "No, Mrs. Ashford, this was something else entirely." Dr. Chen's expression grew more serious. "Based on my examination and the circumstances you've described, I'd say someone deliberately placed these children on that raft, knowing, or at least hoping, they'd be found downstream. The raft was carefully constructed to float, but not to go too far. It's almost as if—" She trailed off, seeming to choose her words carefully. "As if someone was sending them away for their own protection," Benjamin finished, his voice hollow. His hand went unconsciously to his neck, touching the crescent-shaped birthmark hidden beneath his collar. Dr. Chen nodded. "The police have been notified, as is protocol with abandoned children. Detective Morrison should be here shortly to take your statements. In the meantime, you can see the boys if you'd like. They're in room 307, third floor." The elevator ride felt eternal. Amelia pressed close to her mother's side, her small hand clutching Victoria's with surprising strength. Benjamin stood apart, staring at his reflection in the polished steel doors, seeing not his own face, but the ghost of his sister's. The sister he hadn't seen in 4 years, the sister who had vanished into a marriage that everyone knew was wrong, but no one could stop. Room 307 was painted in soft blues and yellows, clearly designed to be calming. A nurse looked up as they entered, smiling warmly. "The little ones are sleeping now. They've been fed and changed. Poor things were hungry." The twins lay in a single hospital crib, curled toward each other in a way that spoke of comfort and familiarity. Someone had dressed them in donated hospital clothing, matching blue onesies that were slightly too big. Their blonde hair had been washed and combed, revealing features that made Benjamin's breath catch in his throat. "They look like her," he whispered, reaching out to gently touch one baby's soft cheek. "God help me, Victoria. They look exactly like Sarah did at this age." Victoria moved closer, studying the sleeping toddlers with professional assessment born from years of volunteer work with children's charities. "The birthmark," she said softly, pointing to the crescent-shaped mark on the first twin's neck. That's definitely the Ashford family mark. Your father had it, you have it, and Sarah had it too. This proves their family. But where is she? Benjamin's voice cracked with anguish. Where's my sister? Why would she send her babies away like this? Sarah loved children. She always talked about being a mother someday. She wouldn't just abandon them unless... He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the terrible possibilities that crowded his mind. Amelia had been quiet throughout this exchange, but now she tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, the blanket had a name on it. Martha. Can we find Martha?" Victoria and Benjamin exchanged glances. In the chaos of rushing to the hospital, they'd left the blankets behind, but Victoria had taken photos of everything with her phone, including that telltale embroidery. "Smart girl," Victoria murmured, kissing the top of Amelia's head. She pulled out her phone, scrolling to the image of the blanket. "Martha, it's not much, but it's a start. Mr. and Mrs. Ashford?" A new voice interrupted from the doorway. A tall man in a rumpled suit stood there, badge clipped to his belt. He had the weary eyes of someone who'd seen too much, but his expression softened as he looked at the sleeping twins. "I'm Detective Marcus Morrison. I need to ask you some questions about how you found these children." The interrogation, though Morrison was careful to call it an interview, took place in a small consultation room down the hall. Amelia stayed with a kind nurse who promised to let her help feed the babies when they woke up, while Benjamin and Victoria recounted the afternoon's events. Morrison took notes in a small, leather-bound notebook, his pen moving in quick, efficient strokes. "So your daughter found them around 3:15 p.m.? You arrived at the river by 3:30, and you were here at the hospital by 4. That's a pretty tight timeline." "I didn't hesitate," Benjamin said firmly. "My daughter called, said there were babies in the river, and I ran. My wife and I both ran." "I'm not questioning your response time, Mr. Ashford. I'm trying to establish how far upstream these babies might have been placed in the water." Morrison flipped back through his notes. "The current in that section of the river is fairly gentle, maybe 2 miles per hour. If they'd been in the water more than an hour, they would have floated much farther downstream, probably past your property entirely." Victoria leaned forward, her analytical mind engaging with the puzzle. "So whoever put them in the river did so recently and close to our property. They knew where the babies would end up." "That's my thinking," Morrison confirmed. He set down his pen and looked directly at Benjamin. "Now tell me about Sarah Ashford and why you think these twins are connected to her." Benjamin's jaw clenched. It had been 4 years since he'd spoken his sister's name aloud to anyone outside his immediate family. 4 years of carefully maintained silence about the source of his deepest regret. "Sarah was my younger sister, 7 years younger than me. She was 22 when she married a man named Derek Russo. I didn't approve. None of us did. Derek was controlling, possessive. He isolated her from the family." "And when was the last time you saw her?" 4 years ago, right after the wedding. She called me a few months later, said she was pregnant. Twins, she was so excited. But then Derek got on the phone and told me to stop harassing his wife. After that, nothing. Every attempt to reach her was blocked. I hired private investigators, but they couldn't find anything concrete. Derek moved them somewhere, changed numbers, covered their tracks. Morrison's expression darkened. "Did you report this to the police?" "Of course I did, but Sarah never filed any complaints, never reached out for help. Without evidence of a crime or her cooperation, there was nothing anyone could do. She was an adult who chose to cut off contact with her family. That's what everyone kept telling me." Benjamin's hands clenched into fists on the table. "But I knew something was wrong. I could feel it. And now these babies show up on a raft in my river with the family birthmark, and you're telling me that's just a coincidence?" "I don't believe in coincidences, Mr. Ashford, not in cases like this." Morrison stood, gathering his notes. I'm going to run the twins' information through missing persons databases, see if any reports match. I'm also going to look into Derek Russo's current whereabouts. If these are Sarah's children, and if she sent them to you, then something has gone very wrong in that household. Victoria's hand found Benjamin's beneath the table, squeezing tight. Detective, what happens to the babies now? For now, they stay here under protective custody. Once they're medically cleared, Child Protective Services will take temporary custody until we can establish their identity and situation. However, Morrison paused at the door, seeming to weigh his words carefully. Given your family's potential connection and your resources, you could petition for emergency foster placement. It would keep them out of the system while we investigate. Benjamin was already nodding before Morrison finished speaking. Yes, absolutely yes. Whatever paperwork needs to be filed, whatever hoops we need to jump through, we'll do it. Those boys are family, and they're staying with family. After Morrison left, Benjamin and Victoria sat in silence for a long moment, hands still clasped together on the scarred plastic table. Finally, Victoria spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Ben, if Sarah sent these babies to you, if she risked everything to get them to safety, what does that say about the danger she's still in? Benjamin's eyes were haunted as he met his wife's gaze. It means we're not just looking for my sister anymore, Victoria. We're racing against time to save her life. Down the hall, in room 307, the twins stirred in their sleep. One of them whimpered softly, and the other immediately shifted closer, tiny hands reaching out in the unconscious need for comfort. The nurse watching over them made a note in her chart. Brothers demonstrate strong bond, accustomed to relying on each other for comfort. On the windowsill, barely noticeable among the standard hospital supplies, sat the plastic bag containing the boys' belongings. The damp blankets, a small wooden toy carved in the shape of a duck, and tucked deep in the corner of one blanket, a photograph. The photo had been damaged by water, the edges curled and the image faded, but two faces were still visible. A young woman with blonde hair and tired eyes, holding two small boys, and embroidered on the corner of the blanket in the photo, clear as day, was that name again. Martha. The puzzle pieces were there, scattered and waiting to be assembled. But time was running out, and somewhere in the growing darkness of evening, a young mother named Sarah Ashford Russo was making impossible choices, sacrificing everything for the sake of her children, not knowing if her desperate gamble would pay off or if she'd just sent her babies floating into an uncertain future with no way to follow. 2 days after the twins were found, the Ashford household had transformed into something resembling organized chaos. The formal dining room had been converted into a temporary nursery, complete with 2 cribs, changing stations, and enough baby supplies to stock a small store. Benjamin had pulled strings, called in favors, and leveraged every connection he had to fast-track the emergency foster placement paperwork. By some miracle, or more likely, his substantial donations to various child welfare organizations over the years, the twins were released into their care, pending the investigation. Amelia had taken to her new role as big cousin with the seriousness of a solemn vow. She insisted on helping with everything, from warming bottles to folding the tiny clothes that Victoria had purchased in bulk from the upscale baby boutique in town. The little girl seemed to understand, in that intuitive way children sometimes do, that these babies needed her. "What should we call them?" Amelia asked on the 3rd morning, watching as her mother expertly changed one twin's diaper while the other kicked his legs on a nearby playmat. "We can't just keep saying the twins forever." Victoria paused, considering. "You're right, sweetheart, but we don't know their real names yet. We don't want to confuse them if they're used to different names." "What about temporary names?" Amelia suggested, her young face serious with thought. "Like nicknames until we find out their real ones. Benjamin looked up from his laptop where he'd been coordinating with Detective Morrison for the dozenth time that morning. A soft smile crossed his tired face, the first genuine smile in days. "That's actually a brilliant idea, Princess. What do you think we should call them?" Amelia studied each baby carefully, as if their temporary names were a matter of grave importance. The first twin, the one with the birthmark, had slightly lighter hair and a more cautious demeanor. He watched everything with wide, serious eyes, rarely crying but always alert. The second twin was bolder, more vocal, quicker to laugh and quicker to fuss. That one, Amelia pointed to the first twin, should be River, because we found them in the river, and he seems like water, quiet but strong. "And his brother?" Victoria prompted gently. "Sky," Amelia declared with certainty. "Because he cries loud like thunder, but then he smiles like sunshine. Sky." Benjamin felt an unexpected lump form in his throat. "River and Sky. Those are perfect, Amelia. Absolutely perfect." The naming seemed to solidify something in the household. River and Sky became part of the family rhythm. Bottles at specific times, naps that Victoria scheduled with military precision, bedtime routines that involved Amelia reading picture books in her most dramatic storytelling voice. The boys responded to their temporary names within days, their heads turning when called, their faces lighting up at familiar voices. But beneath the domestic routine, the investigation continued with increasing urgency. Detective Morrison arrived on the fourth day, with news that made Benjamin's blood run cold. "We found Derek Rousseau," he announced without preamble, settling into the leather chair in Benjamin's home office. "Or rather, we found where he's been. He's currently on a work assignment in Seattle. Has been for the past 6 weeks. 6 weeks? Benjamin's mind raced. So he wasn't even there when the babies were put in the river? No, he wasn't, which raises interesting questions about who did put them there. Morrison pulled out his tablet, scrolling through notes. "I spoke with his employer. Derek works for a tech consulting firm, travels frequently. According to his boss, he's been a model employee, professional, reliable, no red flags. When I asked about his family, he said Derek mentioned having a wife and twin boys back home in upstate New York, near Lake Placid." Victoria, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped into the room. Lake Placid. That's almost 4 hours from here. How would the babies have gotten here if Sarah and Derek are living that far away? "That's question number 1, Morrison said grimly. Question number 2 is why Derek hasn't reported his children missing. I did some checking. No missing persons reports, no Amber Alerts, nothing. Either he doesn't know they're gone, or he doesn't want anyone to know they're gone." "The second option is worse," Benjamin said quietly. "Much worse." Morrison nodded. "I managed to get a warrant to access their property records. Derek and Sarah, or at least Derek because Sarah's name isn't on any documents, own a small house about 10 miles outside of Lake Placid. Very isolated, no close neighbors. I'm heading up there this afternoon with local police to do a welfare check." "I'm coming with you," Benjamin said immediately, already standing. "Mr. Ashford, that's my sister, detective. If she's there, if she's hurt or scared or being held against her will, I need to be there. I won't interfere with your investigation, but I'm coming." Morrison studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Fine. But you follow my lead, understand? We do this by the book." The drive to Lake Placid took 5 hours through increasingly rural landscape. Benjamin sat in the passenger seat of Morrison's unmarked car, watching pine forests and mountains roll past, his mind conjuring terrible scenarios about what they might find. Morrison had briefed him on the basics. They'd coordinate with local authorities, approach the house cautiously, assess the situation before taking action. "Tell me about Sarah," Morrison said as they crossed into the Adirondacks, breaking a long silence. What was she like before Derek? Benjamin smiled despite his anxiety. She was sunshine in human form, laughing constantly, always seeing the best in people, impossibly optimistic. She wanted to be a teacher, elementary school. She loved kids, could make even the grumpiest child smile. Our parents died when she was 16, car accident, and she came to live with Victoria and me. We tried to give her as normal a life as possible, sent her to good schools, made sure she had everything she needed. His smile faded. Maybe we protected her too much. She was so trusting, so ready to believe that everyone had good intentions. When Derek came along, he seemed perfect at first, charming, attentive, successful. By the time we saw the warning signs, the way he questioned her choices, the way he wanted to know where she was every minute, the way he slowly isolated her from friends, she was already in love, or what she thought was love. Classic abuser pattern, Morrison murmured. Charm offensive, gradual isolation, then control. I should have done more, Benjamin said, his voice heavy with regret. I should have fought harder to stop the wedding, should have found a way to maintain contact, should have... Shoulda, woulda, coulda, Morrison interrupted, not unkindly. I've been doing this job for 20 years, Mr. Ashford. I've seen cases like this too many times. The victims often don't want to be saved. They're trauma-bonded. They believe they can fix their partner. They're ashamed to admit they made a mistake. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. But now she's trying to save her children, Benjamin said softly. That has to mean something. That has to mean she's ready to break free. They arrived at the Lake Placid police station just after sunset. 2 local officers, a veteran sergeant named Patricia Valdez and a younger deputy named Ryan Cooper, met them in the parking lot. After a quick briefing, they formed a small convoy. Morrison and Benjamin in one vehicle, Valdez and Cooper in a patrol car behind them. The house was exactly as Morrison had described, small, isolated, set back from a winding dirt road with no visible neighbors. It was a modest structure, maybe 200 square feet, with peeling paint and a sagging porch. The yard was overgrown, a rusted swing set listing to one side. A single light burned in a window facing the driveway. Someone's home, Valdez observed, her hand resting on her service weapon. Cooper, cover the back. Mr. Ashford, you stay in the vehicle until we clear the scene. Benjamin wanted to argue, but he'd given his word. He watched from the car as the 3 officers approached the house, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his temples. Morrison knocked on the door, called out his identification. Silence. Another knock, louder this time. Then, so faint Benjamin almost missed it, a woman's voice, trembling and afraid. Who's there? Police, ma'am. We're here to conduct a welfare check. We need you to open the door. More silence. Benjamin could see shadows moving behind the curtained windows, could sense the fear even from this distance. Finally, the door cracked open and an elderly woman peered out. She was small, maybe 5 feet tall, with white hair pulled back in a bun and wearing a cardigan despite the warm evening. Her eyes were sharp with suspicion and worry. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice stronger than her frail appearance suggested. "I haven't done anything wrong." "No one's accusing you of anything, ma'am," Morrison said gently. "Are you Martha?" The woman's face drained of color. Her hand, spotted with age and clutching the doorframe, began to tremble. "How do you know my name?" "Your name was embroidered on a blanket that was wrapped around 2 baby boys who were found in a river in Riverside, Connecticut 4 days ago. Those boys are safe and being cared for, but we need to talk to you about how they got there. And we need to know—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Where Sarah Russo is right now." Martha's composure crumbled. Her legs seemed to give out, and she would have fallen if Sergeant Valdez hadn't caught her. "Thank God," the old woman sobbed, clutching at Valdez's uniform. "Thank God they made it. Thank God someone found them. Sarah was so afraid they wouldn't make it, that they'd float past and drown. But I told her the river would take them where they needed to go, and oh God, you found them, you actually found them. Benjamin couldn't stay in the car anymore. He was out the door and up the porch steps before anyone could stop him. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice rough with emotion. "Where is Sarah?" Martha looked up at him, and in her rheumy eyes he saw profound sadness. "She's gone, son. Your sister is gone, and I don't know if we'll ever find her alive." Martha's living room was a time capsule from another era. Doilies on every surface, photographs in ornate frames covering the walls, the faint smell of lavender and old books. She sat in a worn armchair, a cup of tea trembling in her weathered hands, while Benjamin paced like a caged animal, and the officers strategically positioned themselves around the small space. "Start from the beginning," Detective Morrison said gently, pulling out his notebook. "How do you know Sarah Rousseau?" Martha took a shaky sip of tea before speaking. "I was her neighbor when they first moved here 3 years ago. Sweet girl, so young and already so broken. I could see it in her eyes, that haunted look of someone living in fear. Her husband worked away from home most of the time, and she was alone with those babies. I started bringing over food, offering to watch the boys when she needed a break. At first, she was too scared to accept, but eventually we became friends. The only friend she had, I think." "Did you witness abuse?" Sergeant Valdez asked, her pen poised over her own notepad. "Not directly. Derek was careful, he always is. But I saw the bruises she tried to hide, heard the way she flinched when I moved too quickly, noticed how she always checked her phone with this look of terror, like she was waiting for an explosion." Martha's voice hardened with anger. "I'm 83 years old. I've seen enough in my life to know evil when I see it, and that man is evil." Benjamin stopped pacing, his hands clenched into fists. "Why didn't she leave? I would have helped her. I would have given her anything. Money, protection, lawyers, anything." Martha's eyes filled with compassion as she looked at him. "Because he told her that if she ever tried to leave, he'd take the boys where she'd never find them. He had money, connections, a clean reputation. She was a woman with no job, no resources, isolated from her family. Who would believe her? Who would help her?" She paused, letting the painful truth sink in. Until 6 weeks ago, she'd resigned herself to surviving, to protecting her boys as best she could within that prison. What changed 6 weeks ago? Morrison leaned forward, sensing they were approaching the crucial information. Derek got a promotion, a 6-month assignment in Seattle. He'd be gone for extended periods, only coming home every few weeks. For the first time since they married, Sarah had breathing room. She came to me 2 days after he left, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before: hope. Martha smiled sadly at the memory. She said she was going to leave him. She had a plan, but she needed help, and she was terrified to ask anyone, because Derek had ways of finding out everything. Benjamin sat down abruptly on the sofa, his legs no longer able to support him. "She could have called me. God, Martha, she could have called me." "She wanted to," Martha said softly. "She talked about you all the time, her big brother who always protected her, who she'd hurt by marrying Derek, who she was too ashamed to face after all these years. She was going to call you, Benjamin. That was part of her plan. But then everything went wrong." The room fell silent except for the ticking of an ancient grandfather clock in the corner. Morrison broke the silence, his voice carefully neutral. "What went wrong, Martha?" Martha set down her teacup with a clatter, her hands shaking too hard to hold it steady. 3 weeks ago, Sarah discovered that Derek had been lying about his work schedule. He'd told her he wouldn't be home for another month, but she overheard him on the phone telling someone he'd be back in 2 days. She panicked. She wasn't ready, hadn't arranged transportation, hadn't gathered enough cash, hadn't executed her escape plan. She did the only thing she could think of. She brought the boys to me and asked me to keep them safe while she figured out what to do. "So the twins have been with you for 3 weeks?" Victoria asked, speaking for the first time. She'd quietly entered the house during Martha's story, unable to wait in the car any longer. "Yes." Sarah would visit when she could, always terrified Derek would find out. But he didn't suspect anything. He thought the boys were at home with her, and she managed to keep up the pretense during his brief visits. She was buying time, trying to arrange things. Martha's voice broke. Then 5 days ago, everything fell apart. Benjamin's head snapped up. 5 days ago? That's the day before the twins were found in the river. Martha nodded, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. Derek came home unexpectedly. He went to the house, found it empty, and realized Sarah had been lying to him. According to what Sarah told me in our last phone call, he was enraged, absolutely enraged. She managed to calm him down by telling him the boys were with a babysitter, that she'd been going to therapy appointments he didn't know about, trying to be a better wife. He believed her, or pretended to, but Sarah knew she was out of time. She called me that night, terrified, crying so hard I could barely understand her. "What did she say?" Benjamin whispered, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. "She said Derek was planning something. She'd found a burner phone he'd hidden, seen text messages about getting rid of the problem, and making sure there's no evidence. She didn't know if he meant her or the boys or both, but she knew they were all in danger. She begged me to save her babies. She gave me your address, Benjamin. She'd kept track of you all these years, knew exactly where you lived. And she told me how to get the twins to you." Morrison's head jerked up. "She planned the river route?" "She grew up in Riverside," Martha explained. "She knew that river, knew the currents, knew exactly where the water flows and where it would take a raft if launched from the right spot. There's an old boat launch about 8 miles upstream from your property, Benjamin. Sarah studied maps for weeks, calculated everything. She told me exactly where to put the boys in the water, what time to do it, so the current would carry them to your estate during daylight hours when someone would be outside. She said your daughter loved to play near the river, that there was a good chance she'd be the one to find them. Amelia." Benjamin thought of his 6-year-old daughter playing innocently in the garden, stumbling upon her cousins in the most dramatic rescue imaginable. Sarah had counted on a child's compassion and quick action. It was desperate, dangerous, and it had worked. "So you drove the twins down here, put them on a raft, and sent them downriver to us," Benjamin said slowly, piecing it together. "That's why they were well cared for, recently fed, not seriously harmed by the experience. You made sure they'd be okay." "I did everything Sarah asked," Martha confirmed. "I drove through the night, got to the boat launch at dawn, and sent those babies to you with prayers and tears. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, watching them float away, but Sarah said it was the only way to save them. Derek would never think to look for them with you. He'd forbidden Sarah from ever contacting her family, and he believed she'd obeyed. The boys would be safe with you while Sarah handled Derek." "Handled him how?" Valdez asked sharply. "What was Sarah planning to do?" Martha's face crumpled. She was going to turn herself in, not to police, because she didn't think they'd believe her without evidence, but to Derek. She was going to tell him the boys were dead, that she'd hidden them somewhere, and they'd died of exposure, that it was all her fault. She thought if he believed the boys were gone and she was completely broken, he'd lose interest in hunting them, would maybe even divorce her and move on. She was willing to sacrifice everything, her freedom, her safety, her life, to make sure Derek never found river and sky. Benjamin was on his feet again, his face flushed with anger and anguish. "That's insane! That's suicide! Why would she think—" He stopped abruptly as realization dawned. "She doesn't know we found them. She doesn't know the boys are safe with us. She thinks she's protecting them by keeping Derek focused on her." "Oh, God!" Victoria breathed. She's with him right now, playing this dangerous game, and she has no idea the boys are already saved. Morrison was already on his phone, barking orders to someone on the other end. I need an APB out on Sarah Russo and Derek Russo immediately. White female, 26 years old, 5'5", blonde hair, blue eyes. White male, 34 years old, 6'2", brown hair, brown eyes. Last known location, Lake Placid area. Consider Sarah potentially in danger. Derek potentially dangerous. Yes, immediately. He hung up and turned to Martha. When was the last time you heard from Sarah? 4 days ago. She called from a gas station payphone. She was afraid to use her cell because Derek tracks it. She said she was going through with the plan, that she was going to tell Derek the boys were dead, and that she'd call me in a week to let me know she was okay. Martha's voice dropped to a whisper. She never called. The grandfather clock chimed 9 times, each gong seeming to count down moments of Sarah's life. Benjamin felt something break inside him. The careful control he'd maintained for 4 years, the professional composure that had served him so well in business, the optimistic belief that everything would work out if he just tried hard enough. His sister was out there somewhere, possibly hurt, possibly dying, sacrificing herself for children she believed were dead, but who were actually safe and calling for her in the night. "We need to find her," he said, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. "Right now, tonight. We need to find Sarah before it's too late." Morrison's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted from concern to urgency. Local police just located Derek Russo's truck. It's parked at a hiking trail, head about 15 miles from here, Whiteface Mountain Trail. It's isolated, rugged terrain, and it's getting dark. "That's where she is," Martha said with terrible certainty. "That's where Sarah would go if she wanted to disappear. She used to hike that trail before the babies were born, before Derek started controlling every aspect of her life. If she's trying to make Derek believe she's broken, that she's given up, that's where she'd take him." Or that's where he's taken her," Valdez added grimly, already heading for the door. "Cooper, call for backup and search and rescue. Morrison, you're with me. Mr. Ashford—" "I'm coming," Benjamin said flatly. "Don't bother arguing." Victoria grabbed his arm. "Ben, let the police handle this." "Think about Amelia. Think about the twins." "I am thinking about them," Benjamin interrupted, cupping his wife's face gently. "I'm thinking that those boys deserve to know their mother, that Amelia deserves to meet her aunt, that Sarah deserves to know her children are safe. I've spent 4 years failing to protect my sister. I'm not failing again. Not tonight." The drive to Whiteface Mountain was a blur of flashing lights and radio chatter. Multiple police units converged on the trailhead, along with search and rescue teams equipped with spotlights and thermal imaging equipment. Derek's truck sat empty in the parking lot, and a quick search revealed Sarah's purse tucked under the passenger seat, her cell phone inside with a cracked screen and dead battery. "They went up the trail," Cooper reported, shining his flashlight on fresh footprints in the damp soil. "2 sets, one large, one small. Looks like the smaller prints are irregular, possibly stumbling." Benjamin's stomach clenched. The search team organized quickly, breaking into groups with specific sectors to cover. Morrison assigned Benjamin to stay with him, partly to keep an eye on him, and partly because Benjamin's intimate knowledge of his sister might prove useful. The trail climbed steeply through dense forest, the darkness broken only by flashlight beams and the occasional glimpse of stars through the canopy. The search teams spread out, calling Sarah's name, the sound echoing off rocky slopes. Benjamin's legs burned with exertion, his expensive shoes completely inadequate for the terrain, but he pushed forward with single-minded determination. They'd been searching for nearly an hour when they heard it. A scream, high-pitched and terrified, echoing from somewhere above them on the trail. "Sarah!" Benjamin shouted, abandoning all caution and running uphill toward the sound. Morrison and two other officers sprinted after him, flashlights bouncing wildly. The trail narrowed, becoming treacherous with loose rocks and exposed roots. Another scream, closer now, and then a man's voice, angry and menacing, though the words were indistinguishable. Benjamin rounded a sharp bend and skidded to a halt, his flashlight illuminating a scene from his nightmares. A rocky outcropping jutted over a steep drop, not quite a cliff, but enough of a fall to cause serious injury or death. And there, silhouetted against the night sky, were two figures. Sarah stood at the very edge of the outcropping, swaying dangerously, her clothes torn and muddy, her blonde hair wild around her face. Even from a distance, Benjamin could see the bruises on her arms, the blood on her temple. And behind her, his hand gripping her arm with bruising force, was a man who could only be Derek Rousseau. Derek was tall and conventionally handsome in the way that makes people trust too easily, but there was something cold in his eyes, something dead and cruel in the set of his mouth. He held Sarah with one hand and had the other raised as if to strike. And in that moment, Benjamin understood exactly what his sister had lived with for 4 years. "Police! Let her go!" Morrison shouted, his weapon drawn but not aimed, too risky with Sarah so close to the edge. Derek's head whipped around, his expression shifting through surprise, calculation, and then cold fury. "Stay back! Stay back, or I swear to God I'll push her!" "Derek, please!" Sarah's voice was hoarse, broken. "Please, they're gone. Our babies are gone. There's nothing left. Just let me go. Just let this end." "Shut up!" Derek shook her violently, and Sarah cried out in pain. "You did this. You hid them. You killed them. And now you're going to pay for what you've done." Benjamin couldn't stay silent anymore. "Sarah!" he called out, his voice cracking with emotion. "Sarah, it's me. It's Ben." Sarah's head turned toward him, her eyes widening in disbelief. Even in the harsh glare of flashlights, he could see the moment recognition hit, the way her mouth opened in shock, the way tears began streaming down her battered face. "Ben," she whispered, No, you can't be here. You have to go. He'll hurt you too." "I'm not going anywhere," Benjamin said firmly, taking a step forward despite Morrison's warning hand on his arm. "And Sarah, listen to me. The boys aren't dead. River and Sky are alive and safe. They're at my house with Victoria and Amelia. They're okay, Sarah. Your babies are okay." The effect of his words was immediate and dramatic. Sarah's knees buckled, and only Derek's grip kept her from falling. "What?" she gasped. "What did you say?" "Your plan worked," Benjamin continued, his eyes locked on his sister's. "Martha put them in the river, and Amelia found them. They floated right to us, just like you planned. They're healthy, happy, and waiting for their mother. All you have to do is come home." Derek's face contorted with rage and confusion. "What the hell are you talking about? The kids are dead. She killed them." "I didn't kill them," Sarah said, and suddenly her voice was stronger, clearer. "I saved them. I sent them to the one person in the world I knew would protect them no matter what. I sent them to my brother." She turned to look at Derek, and in her eyes was something Benjamin hadn't seen in 4 years. Defiance. "You lose, Derek. You don't get to hurt them. You don't get to control them. They're free of you forever." "You bitch." Derek's hand drew back to strike, and everything happened at once. Sarah wrenched herself away from his grip with desperate strength, stumbling dangerously close to the edge. Derek lunged after her, his face twisted with fury. Morrison and Valdez rushed forward, and Benjamin, moving on pure instinct, threw himself between Derek and Sarah, his arms outstretched to catch his sister. He felt Sarah's weight hit him as she fell forward, felt Derek's hands grabbing at them both, felt the sickening sensation of loose rock shifting under his feet. For one terrible moment, all three of them teetered on the edge of the outcropping, balanced between safety and disaster. Then strong hands grabbed Benjamin's jacket, hauling him backward. Morrison and Valdez had Derek in custody, forcing him to the ground with professional efficiency, even as he screamed threats and obscenities. And Benjamin wrapped his arms around his sister, pulling her away from the edge, both of them collapsing onto solid ground in a tangle of limbs and gasping breaths. "I've got you," Benjamin whispered fiercely, holding Sarah as she sobbed against his chest. "I've got you, baby sister. You're safe now. You're finally safe." Sarah clung to him with desperate strength, her body shaking with the force of her tears. "My babies," she kept saying between sobs. "My babies, are they really okay?" "Tell me they're really okay." "They're perfect," Benjamin assured her, his own tears falling freely now. "They're absolutely perfect, and they're waiting for you. River and Sky, that's what Amelia named them. They've been asking for you. Somehow they know you're missing. They cry at night like they're looking for someone, and we tell them Mommy's coming. Mommy's coming soon." "River and Sky," Sarah repeated wonderingly, a broken laugh escaping through her tears. "Those are beautiful names. My brave, beautiful boys." Behind them, Derek was being read his rights, his struggles becoming weaker as the reality of his situation sank in. Search and rescue teams appeared with medical equipment, blankets, and warm drinks. Paramedics immediately began assessing Sarah's injuries, while Morrison coordinated with multiple agencies about charges, evidence collection, and protective orders. But Benjamin barely registered any of it. He held his sister, this woman he'd failed to protect, who had shown more courage and sacrifice in 4 years than most people display in a lifetime. She'd sent her children down a river on a prayer and a raft, had offered herself as a sacrifice to keep them safe, had survived 4 years of hell and still found the strength to fight back when it mattered most. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered against his shoulder. "I'm so sorry I left, sorry I married him, sorry I was too proud and ashamed to ask for help." "No," Benjamin said firmly, pulling back to look her in the eye. "No apologies. You survived, Sarah. You protected your children in the most incredible way possible. You're a hero, not a victim. And now you're coming home, you and River and Sky, and we're never letting you go again." As paramedics loaded Sarah onto a stretcher for the trip down the mountain, she reached out and grabbed Benjamin's hand. "Tell them," she said urgently. "Tell my boys that Mommy's coming. Tell them I never stopped loving them, not for 1 single second. Tell them," her voice broke, "tell them I'm coming home." "I'll tell them," Benjamin promised, squeezing her hand. And Sarah, they already know. Somehow, they already know. The journey down the mountain took twice as long as the climb up, every step carefully measured to protect Sarah's injuries. Derek was transported separately, restrained and silent, his brief reign of terror over. By the time they reached the base of the trail, dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day was beginning, and for the first time in 4 years, Sarah Russo was free to see it. The hospital room in Lake Placid Medical Center was nothing like the sterile emergency room where River and Sky had been examined days earlier. This room felt lived in, with flowers from well-wishers crowding every available surface, cards from strangers who'd heard Sarah's story on the news, and a bulletin board covered in photos that Victoria had thoughtfully printed and brought. Pictures of the twins, eating, sleeping, playing, and, most poignantly, pictures of Amelia reading to them. Her serious 6-year-old face bent over a picture book, while 2 blonde babies gazed up at her with absolute trust. Sarah couldn't stop looking at those photos. She studied every detail of her sons' faces, trying to reconcile the 18-month-old toddlers with the infants she'd last seen 3 weeks ago. They'd grown. Their faces had changed, become more defined, more distinctly their own individuals, rather than identical copies. River's contemplative expression, Sky's mischievous grin. She could see their personalities emerging, even in still photographs. "They've been asking for you," Victoria said gently from her seat beside the hospital bed. She'd arrived that morning with fresh clothes, toiletries, and most importantly, more pictures. They don't know the word mama yet. I think they're still too young, but they cry at night with this particular sound, and Amelia swears they're calling for you. Sarah's throat tightened with emotion. I need to see them. I need to hold them. And you will, Victoria assured her. The doctors want to keep you under observation for another 24 hours. You have a concussion, 3 cracked ribs, and more bruises than I can count. But Benjamin is already making arrangements. We're going to bring the boys here tomorrow if you're not cleared for discharge, or we'll bring you home if you are. Home, Sarah repeated softly, testing the word. I don't even know where home is anymore. The house with Derek was never home. It was a prison. Victoria reached out and took Sarah's hand, mindful of the IV line. Home is wherever you feel safe and loved. Right now, that's with us, if you'll accept. The mansion has plenty of room. We've already set up a suite for you and the boys. You can stay as long as you need, whether that's weeks or years. There's no pressure, no judgment, just family. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes again. She'd cried more in the past 24 hours than in the previous 4 years combined, as if her body was purging all the suppressed emotion in one overwhelming flood. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve your kindness after everything. Stop, Victoria interrupted firmly but kindly. You survived domestic abuse. You protected your children at tremendous personal cost. You executed an incredibly brave and desperate plan that saved their lives. You deserve every kindness, every comfort, every good thing that comes your way. And you're going to accept them, Sarah Ashford, because your family loves you and your boys need you whole and healthy. The use of her maiden name, Ashford, not Russo, struck something deep in Sarah's heart. She wasn't Derek's anymore. She might legally still carry his name for now, but she was an Ashford again, part of a family that had never stopped loving her despite her absence. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Detective Morrison entered, looking tired but satisfied. He'd been working around the clock, building the case against Derek, and the evidence was mounting impressively. "How are you feeling, Sarah?" he asked, pulling up a chair. "Like I've been hit by a truck," she admitted with a weak smile, "but alive. Definitely alive. Good. Because I need to talk to you about what happens next." Morrison pulled out his notebook, but his expression was compassionate. Derek has been formally charged with domestic violence, assault, battery, kidnapping, and attempted murder. The evidence is overwhelming. Your medical records that we've subpoenaed, Martha's testimony, text messages we recovered from his phone, and your own statement. He's being held without bail as a flight risk. Sarah's hands trembled. He'll try to get out. He has money, connections. He had money and connections, Morrison corrected. His employer terminated him immediately when news broke. His assets are being frozen, pending investigation of financial abuse. Victoria mentioned you never had access to bank accounts or credit cards, which is a red flag. His family has distanced themselves. Derek Russo is going to prison, Sarah, for a very long time, and there's more. He flipped to a new page in his notebook. We've been coordinating with Connecticut authorities regarding the twins. Given the circumstances of their abandonment and the evidence of domestic violence, CPS is fast-tracking approval for Benjamin and Victoria to maintain emergency custody. And since you're the biological mother with no criminal record and clear evidence of acting in your children's best interests, your parental rights are intact and protected. Derek, on the other hand, is facing permanent termination of his parental rights. Sarah absorbed this information slowly. He can't ever get them back? He can't come after us when he gets out? If he gets out, and that's decades away at minimum, he'll have no legal connection to those children whatsoever. You'll be free to make all decisions about their lives without his input. And if you choose to proceed with divorce, which I strongly recommend, you'll have grounds for an emergency dissolution based on domestic violence. My wife is a family law attorney. She'd be happy to represent you pro bono." For the first time since the nightmare began, Sarah felt the tight knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. "It's really over," she whispered. "It's really over." "The legal part is just beginning," Morrison cautioned. "There will be court dates, testimony, paperwork, but the danger is over. Derek can't hurt you or your children anymore." After Morrison left, Sarah fell into an exhausted sleep, the first genuine rest she'd had in years. She dreamed of river and sky, but this time they weren't crying or floating away on a raft. They were laughing, playing in a sunny garden, reaching up to her with chubby arms, calling out "Mama" in clear, happy voices. And behind them stood Benjamin and Victoria and Amelia, all smiling, all whole, all part of a family that had been broken, but was being mended one day at a time. She woke to find Benjamin sitting beside her bed, his laptop open, working quietly while she slept. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, and for a moment she felt disoriented, unsure if she was really safe or if this was just another dream that would dissolve into nightmare. "Hey," Benjamin said softly, noticing she was awake. He closed his laptop and shifted his chair closer. "How are you feeling?" "Sore, confused, grateful." Sarah tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in her ribs. Benjamin immediately adjusted her pillows, his movements gentle and careful. "Ben, I need to ask you something. Anything. Why didn't you give up on me? After I married Derek, after I cut off contact, after 4 years of silence, why did you keep looking?" Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. "Because you're my sister," he said simply. "Because when Mom and Dad died, I promised I'd always protect you. I failed at that. I should have stopped you from marrying Derek, should have seen the warning signs earlier, should have—" "You couldn't have stopped me," Sarah interrupted. "I was in love, or I thought I was. I wouldn't have listened. This wasn't your failure, Ben. It was mine." "It wasn't a failure," Benjamin said firmly. "It was survival. And Sarah, what you did, sending the boys to me, sacrificing yourself to keep them safe, that was the most incredible act of love and courage I've ever witnessed. Martha told me everything, the planning, the calculations, the risk you took. You could have sent them to CPS, to a fire station, to any number of safe places, but you sent them to family. You trusted me to protect them when you couldn't." "I always trusted you," Sarah said, tears flowing again. "Even when I couldn't contact you, even when Derek convinced me that you hated me for marrying him, I knew in my heart that if I could just get my boys to you, they'd be okay. You'd make sure they were okay." "And they are," Benjamin assured her. "They're more than okay, Sarah. They're thriving. Amelia is convinced they're the best thing that ever happened to her. She's appointed herself their official protector and storyteller. Victoria has them on a schedule that would make a military general weep with envy. And me?" His voice roughened with emotion. "I look at them and I see you at that age, curious and brave and full of wonder. They're amazing kids, Sarah. You did that. Despite everything Derek put you through, you raised incredible children." "For 2 years," Sarah said sadly. "Then I had to give them up." "No," Benjamin corrected gently. "You gave them a chance at life. You gave them safety and family and a future. That's not giving up, that's the opposite. And now you get them back. Tomorrow, Sarah, tomorrow you're going to hold your sons again." The next day arrived with agonizing slowness. Sarah was cleared for discharge with strict instructions for rest, pain medication, and follow-up appointments. Benjamin had arranged for a private transport van equipped for her comfort, and the 3-hour drive back to Riverside passed in a blur of alternating anxiety and anticipation. "What if they don't remember me?" Sarah asked for the dozenth time, her hands twisting in her lap. It's been 3 weeks, that's forever in a toddler's life. What if they're afraid of me? They won't be, Victoria assured her from the front passenger seat. They've been looking at photos of you that we printed from your social media. Old photos from before Derek isolated you. Amelia shows them the pictures every night and says, "This is your mama, she's coming home soon." I know it sounds crazy, but I swear they respond to your picture differently than to others. As they turned onto the long driveway leading to the Ashford estate, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The mansion rose before them, elegant and imposing, but somehow welcoming. Gardens bloomed on either side of the drive, and in the distance she could see the river where her desperate plan had unfolded. The van had barely stopped before the front door burst open and Amelia came running out, her blonde pigtails flying. She skidded to a halt beside Sarah's door, her face alight with excitement and curiosity. "Aunt Sarah," she asked breathlessly, "is it really you?" Sarah looked at this brave, beautiful child who had saved her son's lives and felt her heart expand. "It's really me, sweetheart. And you must be Amelia. Your dad told me you're a hero." Amelia beamed. "I just did what anyone would do. The twins needed help, so I helped them. Come on." They're inside waiting, and they keep looking at the door like they know something special is happening. With Benjamin's help, Sarah made her slow, painful way into the house. Every step hurt, but she barely noticed the physical discomfort. Her entire being was focused on what waited for her in the converted dining room. Victoria opened the door, and Sarah's world stopped. There, in the center of a room filled with toys and sunlight, were her sons. River sat on a playmat, stacking blocks with serious concentration. Sky was cruising along the edge of a sofa, his chubby hands gripping the cushions for balance. They wore matching outfits, soft cotton pants and t-shirts in complementary colors, and they looked healthy, happy, and heartbreakingly beautiful. "River? Sky?" Sarah called softly, her voice breaking. Both boys turned at the sound of her voice. For a moment they simply stared, their identical blue eyes wide and confused. Then something shifted in their expressions, some deep, primal recognition that transcended logic and memory. "Mama," Sky said clearly, the words startling everyone in the room. "He's never said that before," Victoria whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He's never said any words at all." Sky abandoned the sofa and toddled toward Sarah with unsteady but determined steps, his arms outstretched. River dropped his blocks and crawled after his brother with surprising speed, and Sarah, ignoring her injuries and her doctor's orders, dropped to her knees and opened her arms. The reunion was a collision of small bodies and overwhelming emotion. Both boys crashed into her, their hands patting her face, her hair, her shoulders, as if confirming she was real. They made sounds, not quite words, but not quite cries either, urgent vocalizations that spoke of recognition, relief, and need. "Mama," Sky said again, clearer this time. "Mama, mama, mama." River didn't speak, but he pressed his face against Sarah's chest, right over her heart, and held on with all his strength. His small body shook with silent sobs, releasing 3 weeks of confused grief and longing. "I'm here," Sarah whispered, gathering both boys as close as her injured ribs would allow. "I'm here, my brave, beautiful boys. Mama's here, and I'm never leaving you again. Never, ever again." Around them, the Ashford family stood witness to this sacred moment. Benjamin with his arm around Victoria, both of them crying openly. Amelia watching with solemn satisfaction, as if confirming that the story she'd been telling the twins every night had come true. Even the household staff, who had gathered at the doorway, were wiping their eyes and smiling. River finally pulled back, looking up at Sarah with those serious blue eyes. He reached up and touched her face with one gentle hand, then turned to point at Benjamin. "Dada?" he asked, his voice questioning. Everyone froze. Then Sarah smiled through her tears. "No, baby, that's Uncle Ben. He's Daddy's brother. No, wait." She corrected herself, her voice growing stronger. "He's our family, family who loves us. Family who keeps us safe, family we can always trust." River seemed to consider this, then nodded solemnly as if accepting this new truth. He turned back to Sarah and laid his head on her shoulder, his thumb finding his mouth, a comfort gesture Sarah remembered from when he was younger. Sky, meanwhile, had discovered Amelia standing nearby. He reached out to her with one chubby hand, making a sound that could have been her name or could have been a question. Amelia knelt down beside them, careful not to intrude on the reunion, but clearly unable to stay completely away. "Hi, Sky," she said softly. "I told you Mama was coming. I told you she'd be here." Sky looked between Amelia and Sarah, then back to Amelia. "Sister?" he asked, trying out a new word. Amelia's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Yes, I'm your big cousin, which is almost like a sister. I'll teach you things and read you stories and protect you from everything bad. That's what big cousins do." "Nah, that's what family does," Benjamin added, his voice thick with emotion. He knelt down beside the group, his large presence somehow not overwhelming but comforting. "We take care of each other, we protect each other, and we never, ever give up on each other." Sarah looked at her brother, then at his wife and daughter, then at her sons, who were already relaxing into her embrace, their small bodies growing heavy with the security of having their mother back. "Thank you," she said simply, knowing the words were insufficient, but hoping they could feel the depth of gratitude behind them. "Thank you for saving us." "You saved them," Victoria corrected gently. "We just caught them when they floated to us. You did the impossible part. You let them go so they could be safe." Later that evening, after the boys had been fed and bathed and were drowsing in Sarah's arms, Amelia appeared in the doorway of the guest suite that was now Sarah's home. She held something carefully in her hands. "Aunt Sarah?" she asked shyly. "Can I come in?" "Of course, sweetheart, always." Amelia approached and held out what she'd been carrying, a hand-drawn picture coloured with crayons. It showed stick figures, two tiny ones on a raft, a slightly bigger one pulling them from water, two adults running and off to the side, another figure reaching out toward the group. "This is the day I found River and Sky," Amelia explained, pointing to each figure. "This is them, and this is me saving them, and this is Mommy and Daddy running to help, and this," she pointed to the figure reaching toward the group, "is you. Even though you weren't there, you were still there, do you understand?" Sarah understood perfectly. Even across miles and danger, her love had been there on that raft with her sons, protecting them, guiding them home. "It's beautiful, Amelia. It's absolutely beautiful." "I made it for you," Amelia said, placing it carefully on the nightstand. "So you remember that even when you can't be with someone, your love still is." "That's what Mommy told me when I was worried about the twins at night, and I think it's true." Out of the mouths of babes, Sarah thought. This wise, compassionate 6-year-old had articulated what Sarah had been feeling but couldn't express, that love transcends distance, that sacrifice and protection can exist in separation, that sometimes letting go is the greatest act of holding on. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, pulling Amelia into a gentle hug. "Thank you for being so brave and smart and kind. You saved my babies, Amelia. You're their hero." "We're all heroes," Amelia said matter-of-factly. "You, me, Uncle Ben, Grandma Martha, we all saved each other. That's how families work." And in that moment, with her son sleeping peacefully in her arms, surrounded by family who had never given up on her, Sarah Ashford finally believed she was safe. The nightmare was over. The healing could begin. And the future, once so dark and hopeless, now stretched before them bright with possibility. 6 months had passed since that dramatic rescue on Whiteface Mountain, and the Ashford estate had transformed from an elegant but quiet household into something wonderfully chaotic and alive. The formal dining room was now permanently established as the twins' play area. The once pristine gardens bore evidence of toddler excavations and muddy adventures, and the mansion's numerous rooms echoed with children's laughter at all hours. It was a Sunday afternoon in November, and the family had gathered in the large living room for what had become their weekly tradition, family time. The fireplace crackled with warmth against the autumn chill, and the scent of Victoria's famous apple cider filled the air. River and Sky, now 2 years old and remarkably verbal, were engaged in building an elaborate block tower under Amelia's supervision, while Sarah sat on the sofa watching them with an expression of peaceful contentment that still sometimes surprised her when she caught her reflection. "Higher!" Sky demanded, pointing to the tower. "Make it touch the sky, like my name." "It's already pretty high, buddy," Amelia cautioned, her 7-year-old wisdom asserting itself. "Any higher and it's going to fall." "That's okay," River said philosophically, his serious nature unchanged by time. "If it falls, we build it again. Right, Mama?" "That's right, sweet boy," Sarah confirmed, her heart swelling with the casual normalcy of the moment. How many times in the past had she imagined simple scenes like this, never believing they'd be possible? Benjamin entered the room carrying a tray of cider mugs, Victoria close behind, with a plate of fresh cookies. They'd all settled into comfortable routines over the past months, Benjamin working from home more often, Victoria reducing her charity commitments to focus on family, and Sarah slowly rebuilding her life with their support. "I have news," Benjamin announced, settling into his favorite armchair. His tone was careful, and Sarah immediately tensed, old instincts kicking in despite months of safety. Benjamin noticed her reaction and quickly smiled reassuringly. "Good news. Great news, actually. Derek's trial concluded yesterday. He was convicted on all counts: domestic violence, kidnapping, attempted murder. The judge sentenced him to 25 years without possibility of parole for 15 years, and the termination of his parental rights is now officially final and permanent." The room fell silent. Sarah had known the trial was happening. She'd testified via video conference, unable to face Derek in person, but hearing the final verdict still felt surreal. "He can never hurt us again?" she asked quietly, needing the confirmation. "Never," Victoria said firmly, sitting beside Sarah and taking her hand. "Your divorce was finalized last month, and now this. You're legally free of him in every possible way. Sarah Ashford, you took your maiden name back. You are officially a single mother with sole custody of your children and absolutely no legal connection to Derek Russo ever again." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but these were different from the tears she'd shed so often in those first weeks. These were tears of relief, of closure, of true freedom. "It's really over," she whispered. "The legal part is over," Benjamin clarified gently. "The healing takes longer, and that's okay. But yes, Sarah, the nightmare is officially ended. You're safe, the boys are safe, and we're all here to make sure you stay that way." Sky, oblivious to the heavy conversation, chose that moment to knock over the block tower with a triumphant yell. "Boom! It fell! Now we build it bigger!" The adults laughed, the tension broken by a toddler's enthusiasm. River immediately began organizing the blocks by size and color, his methodical approach to rebuilding already evident at such a young age. "That's my River," Sarah murmured fondly. "Always planning, always thinking ahead." "He gets that from you," Benjamin observed. "The planning, the strategy, that river route you designed was genius-level logistics, Sarah." "Desperate-level logistics," Sarah corrected, but she smiled. She'd finally reached a place where she could look back at that desperate decision without being consumed by trauma. "But I'm grateful it worked, grateful for so many things." Amelia abandoned her block-building supervision and climbed onto the sofa beside Sarah. Over the past months, the girl had become incredibly close to her aunt, often seeking her out for conversations and comfort. Sarah represented something important to Amelia. Proof that broken things could be fixed, that scary situations could have happy endings, that heroes came in unexpected forms. "Aunt Sarah?" Amelia asked, her voice thoughtful. "Do River and Sky know what happened? About the river and the raft and everything?" Sarah considered the question carefully. They're too young to understand the full story right now, but as they get older, we'll tell them, age appropriately, about how they came to live here. We'll make sure they know they were always loved, always wanted, and that their family fought very hard to keep them safe. "Will you tell them about how I found them?" Amelia pressed, a hint of childish pride in her voice. "Absolutely," Sarah confirmed, pulling Amelia close. "We'll tell them about brave Amelia, who was playing in the garden and heard babies crying. About how she didn't hesitate. She just jumped right in to help, even though she was supposed to stay away from the river. About how she called her dad and saved the day." "I didn't save the day by myself," Amelia said seriously. "You saved them first by sending them to us. Daddy saved you from the mountain. Uncle Detective Morrison arrested the bad guy. Grandma Martha took care of the babies and drove them to the river. We all saved each other." "You're absolutely right," Benjamin agreed, his voice warm with pride at his daughter's wisdom. "That's what family does. We're all heroes in our own way." Victoria stood and moved to the window, looking out at the river visible in the distance. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I used to look at that river and just see water. Pretty scenery. Now when I look at it, I see the current that carried those babies to safety. I see the miracle of everything aligning perfectly. Timing, weather, Amelia being outside at exactly the right moment. It's like the universe was conspiring to save them. Or family was conspiring," Sarah suggested softly. "Blood calls to blood. Love finds a way. All those cliches that sound silly until they happen to you." A comfortable silence settled over the room, broken only by the twins' chatter and the crackling fire. These moments of peace still felt precious to Sarah, still felt like something she had to consciously appreciate because they'd been denied to her for so long. "I've been thinking," Sarah said slowly, an idea that had been forming for weeks finally crystallizing. "I want to go back to school, finish my teaching degree. I only had 1 year left when I married Derek, and I've always regretted not completing it." Benjamin and Victoria exchanged glances, smiling. "We think that's a wonderful idea," Victoria said. "We've actually already researched online programs and hybrid options that would let you study while being here with the boys. If you're interested, there's a folder on the desk in your room with information." Sarah shook her head, laughing. "Of course you did. You two are always 3 steps ahead. We learned from the best," Benjamin said, gesturing to Sarah. "You planned an elaborate rescue operation while living under surveillance and threat. We can manage some college research." "What will you teach?" Amelia asked curiously. "When you're a teacher, I mean." "Elementary school," Sarah answered. "Young children, like kindergarten or first grade. I want to work with kids who are just learning to read, just discovering how big the world is. I want to help them feel safe and valued and capable of anything." "Because you know what it's like to feel unsafe," Amelia said with that uncanny childhood insight. "So you can help other kids feel better." "Exactly, sweetheart, exactly." The doorbell rang, and moments later Martha appeared in the doorway, escorted by one of the household staff. The elderly woman had become a regular visitor, adopted as honorary grandmother by the entire family. She'd been instrumental in the trial, her testimony about Derek's controlling behavior and Sarah's fear crucial to the prosecution's case. "Grandma Martha," the twins chorused, abandoning their blocks to toddle over to her. She bent down with some difficulty, her aged back protesting, but her face lit up with joy as she hugged both boys. "There are my brave little sailors," she cooed. "Have you been good for your mama?" "So good," Sky assured her. "I only broke one thing today." Everyone laughed. Sky's enthusiasm sometimes outpaced his coordination, leading to minor household disasters that had become family jokes rather than sources of stress. Martha made her way to Sarah, and the two women embraced carefully. Their bond had been forged in crisis, but had deepened into genuine affection. Martha represented the bridge between Sarah's nightmare and her salvation, the person who'd made the impossible plan possible. "How are you, dear?" Martha asked, studying Sarah with the keen eye of someone who'd seen her at her lowest. "I'm good," Sarah said, and realized she meant it. "Really good, Martha. The trial is over, Derek is gone, and I'm starting to plan for the future instead of just surviving the present. That's progress." "That's more than progress," Martha said firmly. "That's victory. You won, Sarah. You got your life back, got your boys back, and got your family back. Derek lost everything. That's justice." They gathered around the fire as the afternoon faded into evening, sharing cider and cookies and stories. Benjamin recounted a particularly amusing business meeting where his competitor had vastly underestimated him. Victoria shared gossip from her book club that had everyone laughing. Amelia performed a dramatic reading of a story she'd written about a brave princess who rescued twin princes from an evil dragon. "The princes were very small," Amelia narrated seriously, "and they couldn't save themselves. But the princess was smart and brave, and she knew exactly what to do. She pulled them from the water and called for help, and then everyone worked together to defeat the dragon forever." The end. "Ah, that's a wonderful story," Sarah said, her throat tight with emotion at the obvious parallels. "You're a talented writer, Amelia." "I learned from you," Amelia said simply. "You wrote the best story of all, the one where you saved River and Sky. I'm just writing it down so they can read it someday." As the evening deepened, the twins began showing signs of tiredness, rubbing their eyes, becoming clingy, their usual energy fading. Sarah gathered them both onto her lap, one on each side, and began humming a lullaby she'd sung to them as infants, a melody they'd been too young to remember, but somehow still responded to. River's head dropped onto her shoulder, his breathing evening out into the rhythm of sleep. Sky fought it a bit longer, his fingers playing with a button on Sarah's shirt, but eventually he too surrendered to exhaustion. "They're so peaceful," Victoria observed softly. "So secure. You can see it in how they sleep, completely relaxed, no tension, absolute trust." "They know they're safe," Benjamin added. "They know their mother is here, their family is around them, and nothing bad is going to happen. That's a gift, Sarah. That's what you gave them by being brave enough to send them away and strong enough to survive until you could come back to them." Sarah looked around the room at these people who'd saved her, supported her, and loved her unconditionally. Benjamin, who'd never stopped searching. Victoria, who'd opened her home and heart without reservation. Amelia, whose quick thinking and compassionate action had set everything in motion. Martha, who'd executed an impossible plan with courage and faith, and these two precious boys sleeping in her arms, alive and healthy and hers. "I love you all," she said simply, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't say it enough, but I do. You saved my life in every way a person can be saved." "We love you too," the room chorused back in various forms, and in that moment, with firelight dancing on the walls and her children's warm weight in her arms, Sarah Ashford finally, truly believed she was home. The months that followed brought continued healing and growth. Sarah enrolled in her teaching program and threw herself into her studies with the passion of someone reclaiming a stolen dream. The twins thrived, their vocabulary exploding, their personalities becoming more distinct with each passing day. River revealed himself to be deeply empathetic and thoughtful, often checking on family members' emotional states with questions like, "You happy, Mama?" Sky was bold and physical, climbing everything, testing boundaries, but always returning to his mother's side when overwhelmed. Amelia started third grade as something of a local celebrity. the girl who'd rescued babies from a river and helped expose a domestic violence situation. She handled the attention with remarkable grace, using her platform to give presentations about water safety and helping others. Sarah attended one of these presentations and felt her heart swell with pride at this remarkable child who'd been the catalyst for their salvation. Detective Morrison closed his case file on the Russo investigation with a sense of satisfaction rare in his long career. Justice had been served, a family had been reunited, and children were safe. He kept one of Amelia's drawings on his desk, the one showing stick figures being rescued from a river, as a reminder that sometimes cases had happy endings. And Derek Russo. He became a cautionary tale whispered in courtrooms and domestic violence support groups. The man who'd tried to control and destroy his family, but had instead destroyed only himself. His name became synonymous with the consequences of abuse, and Sarah took grim satisfaction in knowing that his legacy would be his failures, not his victims. On a warm spring day, nearly a year after that fateful afternoon in the garden, the Ashford family gathered once again by the river. But this time, they came with purpose and ceremony. In Sarah's hands was a small wooden boat, handcrafted by Benjamin, with two names carved carefully into its side, River and Sky. "We're here," Sarah said, addressing her sons who stood holding her hands, "to remember how you came to us, how you floated down this river to safety, how Amelia found you, how our whole family came together to protect you. This boat represents that journey. The scary part, yes, but also the brave part, the part where love was stronger than fear." She knelt down to the boys' level. They were 3 now, old enough to understand more, though the full story would wait for years yet. "You were always loved," she told them. "Even when I couldn't be with you, you were loved. And you always will be." Together the family released the small boat into the current. They watched as it floated downstream, bobbing gently on the same water that had carried the twins to safety until it disappeared around a bend in the river. "Bye-bye, boat," Sky called, waving enthusiastically. "It's going on an adventure," River observed seriously. "Like we did." "Yes," Sarah agreed, pulling both boys close. "Like you did. And now you're home, and you're safe, and you're so, so loved." Amelia slipped her hand into Sarah's free one, completing the circle of family. "This is my favorite story," she declared, "the one where everyone lives happily ever after." "It's not quite ever after yet," Benjamin said with a smile, wrapping his arms around Victoria. "We're still writing it. Every day, we're writing new chapters." "Then let's make them good ones," Sarah said, looking at her children, her brother, her family. "Let's make them filled with love and laughter and safety and joy. Let's make them everything we fought so hard to achieve." As they walked back to the house together, a family reunited and healed, the river continued its eternal flow behind them. It had carried 2 babies to safety, had been witness to desperation and hope, had played its role in a modern miracle. And now it simply flowed as rivers do, carrying its secrets and stories toward an endless horizon. In the mansion, preparations were underway for a celebration, not of rescue or survival, but of life itself. 3 years old for the twins, a milestone that once seemed impossibly distant. Friends and family would gather, there would be cake and presents and laughter, and for one perfect day, there would be nothing but joy. Sarah paused at the threshold, looking back one last time at the river. She thought about the woman she'd been, terrified, trapped, willing to sacrifice everything for her children. She thought about the woman she was now, healing, growing, reclaiming her life piece by piece. They were the same person, but transformed by love and courage and the fierce determination of family. "Thank you," she whispered to the river, to fate, to whatever force had aligned everything perfectly on that May afternoon when Amelia had heard crying and run to help. "Thank you for bringing them home, for—" Then she turned and walked into the house, into the warmth and noise and beautiful chaos of her family, into the future she'd fought so hard to claim. Behind her, the river flowed on, keeping its secrets, witnessing new stories, eternal and unchanging. But the Ashford family, they were forever changed, forever grateful, forever bound by the day when a 6-year-old girl had found 2 babies in a river and called her father with 4 simple words, "Daddy, I found the twins." It was an ending. It was a beginning. It was everything in between. It was, simply put, a miracle. And they lived it, cherished it, and honored it every single day for the rest of their lives.